So, I was originally planning to do a story today about my visit to a lucha libre wrestling match in Mexico City, but that unfortunately fell through at the last minute, and I had to scramble a bit, which is why this episode is a few days late. Perhaps I'll try to revive that piece at some point next season, but in the meantime, the topic I've turned to instead seems much more timely and important, so I think you'll agree it was a good choice. Hope you enjoy it. Also, before I get started, if you like Far From Home, here's another show you might like.
Adventure isn't always something you can prepare for.
There's one trail that goes to that trailhead, and now that trail is on fire.
We had stumbled into this beautiful world that we were completely unequipped to manage.
And I stepped into a foot of water, and that's when I called Ann on the cellular phone. I said, "Hey babe, we're sinking."
I'm Erin Jones. Discover real stories where humans and our habitat meet. Find Human Nature on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's all one word with just one N. Human Nature.
This is Far From Home. I'm Scott Gurian.
There has been a huge earthquake, magnitude 7.0, just off the coast of Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere.
We're hearing, of course, thousands dead, hospitals collapsed, even the palaces collapsed.
A desperate situation here in Haiti tonight, a nation that is desperate on a good day, as they say.
There are wounded people walking through the streets. There are people seeking medical attention.
It is hard to imagine a country less able to cope with a devastating earthquake.
This was the worst earthquake to hit the region in more than 200 years. Centered just west of densely populated Port-au-Prince, a city of 2 million people, now largely in ruins.
This upcoming January marks the 10th anniversary of the massive earthquake in Haiti. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, 12 days into the new year, and destroyed or severely damaged 250,000 homes, killing more than 100,000 people. 8 months later, in September of 2010, I traveled to Haiti with several journalist colleagues to document the country's slow recovery process. On today's episode, I revisit my journey and some of the reporting I did, and I'll check in to see where things stand in Haiti today. When I remember how my trip began, in some ways it was like I'd arrived in Haiti before I even left. I showed up early in the morning at the ticket counter at New York's JFK airport for my direct flight to Port-au-Prince, and it looked like it was going to be a packed flight. I was one of just a handful of Blancs waiting to board, but that wasn't surprising since Haiti isn't exactly a popular tourist destination. Blanc, by the way, spelled B-L-A-N, translates from Creole literally as white, but it also has a more universal meaning that can be used to describe any foreigner. In other words, I don't think you necessarily have to be white to be a Blanc. Anyway, there I was, and the airline workers kept paging passengers over the intercom. Jean Baptiste, please come to the service desk. Miriam Jean, please report for your seat assignment. I started laughing because it seemed like everyone in Haiti was named Jean. Eventually, we boarded 2 hours behind schedule, and the flight attendants seemed to be having a bad day. Sure, they were rushing people to find their seats and stow their luggage quickly so we could finally take off, but there seemed to be something beyond that. An older gentleman with a fedora had accidentally taken my seat, so one of the stewards came over to resolve the situation. He was a big, buff guy who looked like he could bench press 400 pounds, and he had a personality to match. He asked to see the older gentleman's ticket, and when the guy clearly didn't understand, the steward barked back, "English, please, I don't speak your language," refusing to even acknowledge Haitian Creole by name. The other flight attendants also seemed a bit abrupt. We sat on the runway for about an hour before the pilot announced that there was some sort of mechanical failure, so the plane would be taken out of service. Then we returned to the gate, where they gave us free lunch vouchers, and everyone seemed to scramble, as if they were getting their daily rations. A Haitian woman I spoke to told me it was part of her culture for people to always try to be first in line for everything. Later on, as we were waiting to get our new seat assignments for the replacement plane, a flight attendant reminded us to make sure we used our vouchers since it was the only lunch we would get. The people around me started laughing, as if to say, you don't need to remind a Haitian to take free food. Eventually, we received word that the Haitian air traffic controllers would be unable to accommodate our rescheduled flight, so we would need to stay overnight and fly out the following morning. As I stood at the baggage carousel, waiting for my luggage to be returned, I checked my phone and saw there was a big storm in the Caribbean heading towards the island. The Weather Channel said it had a 60% chance of turning into a tropical cyclone and could produce heavy rainfall, life-threatening flash floods, and mudslides. I mentioned this to a guy who was booked on the flight with me, a doctor from upstate New York who'd traveled there before and was returning to help, but it didn't seem to faze him. "Welcome to Haiti," he said. After nearly 2 hours, our luggage finally arrived on the carousel. A large group of us, about 18 Haitians and myself, plus their nearly 50 extremely large and heavy bags, somehow managed to cram into a clown car of a minibus to shuttle us to the hotel where the airline would put us up for the night. It was standing room only, and I was near the front next to an enormous pile of suitcases stacked floor to ceiling. About halfway through the trip, the pile started to give and eventually collapsed entirely, burying me up to my waist as if I was in the rubble of the Haiti earthquake. Thankfully, no one was hurt. In fact, it was kind of funny. The driver told me she'd been working this route for 4 years, but had never seen people who had this much luggage. I struck up a conversation with a woman named Yolette, who told me she had lost everything in the quake and was now returning home after visiting friends and family members in the U.S. They'd given her enough sheets and clothing to fill the 5 checked bags and 2 carry-ons she was bringing with her. Other Haitians were in similar situations, she said, and some also had medical and relief supplies, which explained all the excess baggage. Arriving back at the airport the next morning, I smiled and nodded to some familiar faces I recognized from the aborted trip the day before. We'd formed a bit of a bond through our shared experience of spending a day waiting for a flight that never left, but I think it was more than that. Our connection seemed to have something to do with our status as fellow travelers bound for the same weary and struggling country, which had a long history of overcoming adversity after adversity, and was now facing one of its biggest challenges yet. Of course, as a Blanc, there was a lot I didn't have in common with the rest of the group, but the Haitians I met were pleasantly surprised that I was visiting their island, and they seemed to welcome me into the fold. As I'd learned over the next week, Haiti was only about 1,500 miles from my home in New Jersey, but it was truly a world away. So, thankfully that storm I'd been worried about changed direction and wandered out to sea before I arrived, which was a good thing since Haiti already had enough problems. Driving through the streets of Port-au-Prince for the first time, I saw collapsed buildings everywhere and piles of rubble that had yet to be cleared, even though, as I mentioned, it had been 8 months since the quake. People who'd been displaced from their homes had erected tent cities on pretty much every inch of vacant land. They had shelters and tarps that bore the names of groups like World Vision and Food for the Poor. Then there were all the UN officials and foreign aid workers in vehicles emblazoned with their organization's logos. As a result of decades of trade policies from the United States and the international community, like subsidies for cheap American rice imports that caused Haitians to stop growing their own, people had gradually flocked from the countryside to urban areas to look for work, so the city now seemed to be bursting at the seams. Everything was so frenetic as we made our way through rush hour traffic that I had trouble getting my bearings, so I asked my guide and interpreter Daniel to describe where we were.
Is this like the main intersection right downtown?
Not main intersection, but one of the main one, because it connects like the airport to Delmas.
It's one of the few big intersections that has traffic lights.
Yes, it's one of the first that had the traffic lights anyway.
Our conversation was interrupted as someone swerved ahead of us.
This guy is making a left turn from the right lane right in front of us. And this guy's driving on the wrong side of the road as if he's in Britain.
I recalled something I'd read about Haiti on the U.S. State Department's website while I was preparing for my trip. In the section about travel safety and road conditions for American tourists, some bureaucrat had cautioned that it was common for drivers to use whatever part of the road was open to them, even if it wasn't the correct side of the road. They also said that while drinking and driving is technically illegal in Haiti, people frequently drive after drinking, especially at night. And although Haitian law requires that applicants pass both a written and a driving test to qualify for a driver's license, many Haitian drivers appear unaware of traffic laws. Furthermore, they said signaling is not widely practiced, and many people use their left blinker for all actions, including turning right and stopping in the road, while others flap their left arm out the window to indicate they'll be taking some unspecified action. It all sounded pretty crazy, and now that I'd witnessed it in person, I was really glad I was leaving the driving to someone else. As we drove through the crowded streets, doing our best to dodge the numerous potholes, the one thing that struck me more than anything else was that this was a city of close to 1 million people, but we hardly saw any police officers, there were few functioning streetlights, and power outages seemed to be a common occurrence. Basically, it seemed like a perfect recipe for disorder, but somehow an organized chaos had evolved where people went about their daily lives in spite of it all, and the city seemed to more or less run itself.
I'm really impressed that things work as well as they do, given that it's just people doing things themselves.
This is what I call the miracle of life in Haiti. That Haitians find ways to survive through all this. And maybe that's a good thing, because it just makes the people stronger and stronger so they can really overcome all the challenges every day by just trying to live. And this is what life of Haiti is about. Find your little part of the miracle so you can fit in.
So, yes, to be clear, there were small signs of hope. Dump trucks rumbled through the streets, slowly clearing away a bit of the rubble, and the rebuilding process was underway in some places. In the Delmas section of Port-au-Prince, construction had begun on a new school to replace one that was partially damaged in the quake. That's where we found several laborers clearing dirt from a giant pit to make a well for the new building. It was a hard, back-breaking job done entirely by hand, since proper construction equipment was in short supply. As was common in Haitian culture, the laborers drank moonshine as they worked and sung traditional folk songs. The words to this song went, "I'm getting too old. I can't work any longer." I have to admit, though, that it was hard not to feel pessimistic, since it seemed like it would take forever to rebuild Haiti using shovels and pickaxes alone. It's been nearly a decade now since I was in Haiti, and I wanted to get an update on what ended up happening, so I reached out to someone who I thought could help.
My name is Etan Dupin. I am a journalist and a filmmaker from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I produce mostly for international media, for like Al Jazeera English, BBC. I did a couple work with Vice News. I've been working as a freelance journalist since 2010.
I asked Etan to begin by describing the backdrop of what things were like before the earthquake took place.
Haiti is a very interesting place. It's my country. I lived there almost all my life. Before the earthquake, the situation in Haiti was like very difficult, but also it was stable. And the earthquake happened. It was a really, really horrible scene for, in Haiti. The day the earthquake happened, though, I was traveling from Brazil to Venezuela, and I went back to Haiti like a week after. And I remember it was a crazy situation in the first few days. Haiti was very, very fragile before the earthquake, and the earthquake made things worse like almost immediately, because a lot of people dead, a lot of people loses their houses, their jobs. Almost everyone was living in the streets, not only because they were afraid, but there were still some aftershock. I remember I was staying in downtown Port-au-Prince near the ocean, and then there was an aftershock. And, I started to run immediately because it was like something new for me. Because before 2010, we knew there was an earthquake, but we never had, something like this. In Haiti, we weren't prepared to deal with a 7.0 earthquake like this.
And given that Haiti was sort of in many ways kind of in a fragile situation even before the earthquake, how much of a further setback and challenge would you say the earthquake presented?
The lack of jobs, lack of investment in Haiti was already very, very poor. And even though the government was trying to do a couple of things, do a couple of reform, I think the earthquake destroyed all of this little progress. And I think the earthquake made everything worse, and so many resources that could have used in other ways ended up, being used for the earthquake. So I think it's a major, major setback for Haiti.
So Haiti's always had a pretty large population of financially struggling people. I read one estimate that more than half the population lives on something like $2.40 per day. And meanwhile, there's always been a small minority of wealthier individuals who live in places like the Pétionville suburb of Port-au-Prince. But one of the topics I reported on when I was in Haiti was how there was also this emerging middle class that in some ways was hit the hardest since they lost the most in the disaster. Here's the story I produced back when I was there. On a sweltering day, James Policarp gave me a tour of the Barbancourt 2 tent camp in an industrial area not far from Port-au-Prince's international airport. When I visited, more than 300 families whose houses were destroyed still called this their home. We only received 93 tarps, and we never got any support from anyone to set up well-made shelters, Policarp told me, so we used whatever we could find, like spare lumber, rice sacks, or sheets. The conditions were awful. The toilets were full, there was no running water, and no schools for the children. As president of the camp council, Policarp spent his days trying to make things better. It was a far cry from the life he lived just 1 year earlier. He said he made a decent living running 3 funeral homes, but all of them were destroyed in the quake. He'd poured all his money into the business, and it was his main source of income, so when the earthquake hit, he lost everything he had. Fellow camp resident David Basil had his own version of this story. Basil used to be the principal of a private school, earning a good salary from the tuition fees that parents paid. But a good portion of the building collapsed, and as a result of the disaster, many people could no longer afford to pay for their kids' education. Middle-class Haitians like Basil and Policarp were a small but important group in this impoverished nation before the earthquake. Unlike in the U.S., Haiti's middle class was an emerging class. It consisted of people who ran businesses and had salaried jobs, but they didn't necessarily have any savings, and they didn't have insurance. So when their businesses and workplaces were destroyed, they had to start over from scratch. Patrick Elie was an advisor to former Haitian President René Préval. He told me the earthquake's impact on those in the middle had widespread ramifications.
The poorest people were already living in harrowing condition. For them to adapt was not such a great change. But the middle class really got the earth taken from under their economic feet and under whatever dream they had. And many of them actually left the country, those that were given the opportunity.
Those that stayed, like James Policarp, were trying to be optimistic. When I asked if he thought he'd be able to climb back out of poverty, he recited a Haitian proverb that went, "If you still have your head, there's still a chance to get a hat." But signs of hope were becoming more elusive by the day. Speaking over a crackly phone line, economist Kessner Farrell of the financial consulting firm Groupe Croissants told me that if people like Policarp remained poor, Haiti would be in serious trouble.
When you got a middle class, it's like in the United States.
When you've got a middle class, it's like in the United States. You have the people that are going to consume, buying cars, buying houses. So if you lost a lot of them, it's going to be very difficult for this economy to get growth on a long-term basis, he said. At the time I visited, most aid groups in Haiti were focused on delivering basic needs like food, water, and shelter. But there was a growing awareness that providing assistance to the middle class was key to restoring the economy. The Inter-American Development Bank recognized that around the time of my trip when they gave $20 million to help restructure loans and increase the flow of credit to Haitian business owners. At the same time, better-off Haitians who suffered less devastation were also considering their role in rebuilding the economy. The suburb of Pétionville lies in the leafy green hills above Port-au-Prince. It's an area that's home to the rich, but also to what you might call the upper middle class, like businessman Parnell St. Preux. I visited him in his spacious white stucco home.
Was there any damage at all from the earthquake here?
No, no damage.
None at all?
None at all.
St. Preux was lucky, but the time to breathe a sigh of relief had passed. What Haitians needed now, he said, were investment and jobs. And he thought people like himself, with a little more, had a responsibility to help. He was doing his part by building apartment complexes in the north of the country.
Right now, most people who have money tend to invest that money overseas. We have to reverse that trend. People have to start investing back into the country. And they have to create opportunities so people could stay.
St. Preux sat on the back porch of his home and poured himself a glass of water as the sun dipped behind the palm trees. He speculated that if any good could come out of this, the earthquake might actually give Haiti an opportunity to finally change things and improve the quality of life for its people. But with rubble still in the streets 9 months later, he was starting to think it was a missed opportunity. From where he sat, St. Preux had a view overlooking the valley below. But unless Haiti's economy recovered, he'd continue to look out on a country in ruins.
Okay, so that's how my story ended back in 2010. I'm back in the present now with my guest, Etienne Dupain. And Etienne, these people that were in this emerging Haitian middle class might have owned small businesses. Some even bought their own homes, which I understand was a pretty big thing since someone told me that in Haiti you almost need to stop eating to save enough money to buy a house. So they were slowly starting to get ahead, but then suddenly they were placed in this position where they had to basically start over from scratch. Did you know people like this?
I'm not only know people like this, I have people in my family where, loses their job, their savings, and because they had to rebuild. Yeah, it's fair to say the middle class was the one that was hit hardest during this crisis. And since Haiti is one of the most unequal country on earth, where you have probably less than 1% of the population who lives in an area in Pétionville, like you were saying, who control almost everything in the country. The worst part about this is it's not like some well-organized elite that you can see these people, they are making money, but also they are investing in the country. No, it's not like this. It's like a group of people who's they only see themselves. They only go doing their businesses, and they don't really invest in the country, to say that, because they claim they are Haitian. They claim they they live in the country, but it's just a question of control because people were very frustrated, very mad, and asking for a better life, asking for deep changes.
How significant do you think the impact of all this was on Haiti's economy? And have people been able to kind of build back their lives and re-achieve middle-class status in the decades since the earthquake?
No, definitely not. I mean, in 2017 alone, 107,000 Haitian leave Haiti for Chile, just for Chile alone. That's 1% of the Haitian population. Because of lack of job, lack of opportunity, because people cannot, live their lives. And it's not only Chile. You have people who went to Brazil. You have people who went to Venezuela. You have everywhere. So even right now, as we speak, you have Haitian who are stranded at the U.S.-Mexico border. It's thousands of them.
As we heard in my piece, some Haitians I spoke to thought that perhaps with the billions of dollars in foreign aid money, their country might have the chance to start over with a clean slate to improve living conditions and rebuild things better than they were before. And there was also this thought that being in the world spotlight might attract some international investment. Looking back a decade later, did any of those predictions come true?
I mean, definitely not. Listen, the NGOs and the foreign governments was help the reconstruction. The approach was a top-down approach, which is never work anywhere, And things could have done way, way better if they were focusing on what's actually work, what Haitian wants. The approach was mostly we are taking, these type of experiences and then we want to apply them in Haiti, which is not how you do development. You have to go to the place and try to understand it first and try to use, method that you can apply actually. So, it's a major disaster, the whole reconstruction thing.
I was going to ask, because after the disaster, there was all this aid money pouring in. People gave money to the Red Cross, all these different organizations, swarms of NGOs showed up. And I guess some people would be surprised that it all didn't have a greater impact.
Yeah, people will have, I mean, let's take Red Cross, for example. Red Cross, they raised over $500 million for Haiti, though. One of the first things the Red Cross did with that money is that they had a debt for the International Red Cross. They used that money to pay part of the debt. And there's a report on public radio on like the Red Cross actually built only six houses in Haiti with $500 million of money raised. So it was completely insane. It was a bunch of foreign NGOs, decided on what they're going to do with the money that they raised for people in Haiti, but without Haitians.
So I was in Haiti in the fall of 2010 on the eve of the presidential elections, which Michel Martelly went on to win. And I assumed that in the aftermath of such an enormous disaster, people might place their hopes in certain candidates who are pledging to bring about change. But as I asked around, I mostly found widespread apathy. And, this is, of course, a country that has a ton of problems that need to be solved. But the majority of the population seems to think it's unlikely that the solutions will come from the elected leaders. People told me they've been disappointed so many times in the past that they didn't plan on voting because they found it hard to believe that whoever took office would truly make a difference. And also they didn't want to feel responsible if they voted for someone who then failed to live up to the promises they had believed in. So I reported this story asking them what they thought it would take to bring about change in Haiti. About 100 young people from the tent city of Korai gathered on a street in downtown Port-au-Prince in front of the crumbled remains of Haiti's presidential palace. Along with 1 million of their fellow Haitians, their homes had been destroyed in the earthquake, and life had yet to return to normal. They blocked the road, chanting, "We're tired and we're not going to take it anymore." And they carried handmade signs and banners that said things like, "We're not going to vote while we're still living in tents," and "We want permanent shelter before the election." Sano Grenell worked with a coalition of groups trying to provide housing for victims of the earthquake. He said the situation was bad, but he thought it was unlikely a new president would make things any better. "We don't think the election will solve any of the problems of Haiti," he said. "The election will just keep the conservative powers running the country, which always undermine the grassroots and the poor people, so they'll continue to experience misery and suffering." That might just sound like typical protest jargon, but it's a point of view shared by many Haitians who think the political process offers little hope for change. They felt this way even before the earthquake, when voter turnout for an election was sometimes less than 10%. And now, as people grew frustrated with the slow pace of reconstruction, that feeling was getting deeper by the day. It was amplified by the sense among many that Haiti's well-entrenched political powers had made it difficult for serious challengers to run for office. In a crowded marketplace near the National Stadium, I met Peter, a 23-year-old cell phone repairman, who told me Haiti was so damaged that he didn't think anyone could fix the situation. "The politicians just make promises, but they really can't do anything at all," he said. "They talk about elections, but it's nonsense because the schools are still buried under the rubble. So how can you talk about the election when you don't even talk about schools?" The more time that passed after the earthquake, with people not being made whole again, the more tensions continued to grow. But perhaps there was a silver lining. At least that was the hope of Patrick Elie, who was Haiti's former Secretary of State for Public Security and a longtime pro-democracy activist.
Incredible as it may sound, the earthquake rekindled the spirit to organize first at the grassroots level and then at the national level. People who are able to really share a common analysis of Haiti's problem and also make proposals for change.
He speculated that real change in Haiti wouldn't come about from the ballot box, but from ordinary Haitians frustrated with their government, getting together and forming a movement to demand that things improve. So, Etan Dupain, is people's lack of faith in politicians largely due to the fact that ineffective leadership and corruption have actually contributed to the country's problems?
Yes, they are very, very incompetent. And also, corruption is at the center of like everything that's happening in Haiti today. Haiti was part of the Petrocaribe program. Petrocaribe was a oil program funded by Venezuela, where the whole fund like generated $4.2 billion of oil that Venezuela sent to Haiti. So Haiti paid 40% or 60% up front. I don't remember exactly what it is, but the rest gave back to Haiti as a loan. Haiti will pay with like 1% interest, something like that, over a period of 25 years. With the condition like the government will use that money to invest in social programs like infrastructure, food, this type of thing. But last year, a government audit shows like most of that money went, there is no explanation for that money. It was like embezzled or stolen or mismanaged. So this is like the center of like the Haitian not trusted politician, because every time a politician come offering like, they're going to be their savior, at the end of the day, this is what happened.
As we heard, my story ended with the late Patrick Ellie suggesting that things had gotten so bad that he expected regular Haitians would be moved to protest in the streets, and that's where the real change would come from. We've actually been seeing some of that recently, haven't we?
Yes, there's a huge fight in the street of Port-au-Prince. You have huge protests almost every single day for 2 months now, asking for accountability, especially related to corruption and impunity. In the last 8 weeks, everything has been paralyzed in Haiti because the government doesn't have money right now. The government cannot import gas for the country. They cannot pay their employee. They cannot, almost do anything. And it's going to get worse because these protests are getting really, really, really violent. Yesterday, there is a report from the UN that they count 42 dead in the last few weeks alone in the protests. And the same with Amnesty International. Yesterday, we put out a report that said they documented over 35 people who died, and they call on the president. They point finger at him directly as like someone who's like controlling the police, pushing the police, toward repression. They're asking for the president to resign because the president was also involved in this corruption scandal. But today, there is something bigger that's happening that's not happened before in Haiti. It's like people attacking the system. When you see people talking about the system, people asking for like major changes.
So as someone who's reported from Haiti for many years now, how significant do you think this moment right now is, and how likely do you think it will be that these protests will lead to measurable change?
I mean, first of all, I don't know. I don't know what will happen, but I feel like too many people are talking about like changing the system for something good not to come out of this. That's what I hope. People are asking for the president to step down and then face trial because the corruption, there is no end in sight if you don't make an example of someone.
I want to end our conversation with a brief discussion about journalism in Haiti. In the aftermath of the earthquake, and then you'll remember there was also a cholera outbreak, radio served an important purpose, getting essential information to people when it was difficult to know just what was going on. I was curious to find out more about this, so when I was there, I paid a visit to a community radio station that was playing a vital role in one of the poorest sections of the capital. Water lapped gently against the shore of the Bay of Port-au-Prince, while kids went skinny dipping and majestic mountains reached up to the clouds off in the distance. At first glance, it looked kind of idyllic, but for Joachim Jarrell and the 300,000 people who live here, Cité Soleil is no paradise. In fact, it's a sprawling slum that has a reputation for being one of the roughest parts of Port-au-Prince. So a few years ago, Jarrell and some friends realized they had to do something. Armed groups from different parts of the neighborhood were fighting against each other, he told me. Young men carried guns, and young women got pregnant at very early ages. We decided to address these issues by starting a radio station so we could tell the youth about alternatives to violence and make a difference in their lives.
They called the station Radio Boukman after Duddy Boukman, a voodoo priest who led the slave revolt that gained Haiti its independence. Today, Radio Boukman has become a fixture in the community. Much of the station's programming, like this noontime newscast, focuses on providing residents of Cité Soleil with the kind of life and death information they can't get anywhere else. With little information and widespread devastation, people grow angry. But Jarrell says the reporting on Radio Boukman has helped diffuse some of the tension. Through the radio, we've had an opportunity to bring together the leaders of the different groups to work out their differences on the air, he said. Even if they don't agree on things, they can still sit down and talk, because they're all human beings, and most problems can be solved by talking things out. After the earthquake, Radio Boukman's broadcasts helped relief groups like Doctors Without Borders by providing first-hand reports about what sections of the city needed the most aid. And during hurricane season, the station aired a daily program telling residents how to prepare for approaching storms. Orpha Dessous was one of Radio Boukman's 6 reporters. She said that most other media tend to ignore Cité Soleil, so anytime journalists pay attention to the people who live there, they get really excited because it's not very common. At the time I met her, Dessous was 30 years old and had just started at the station less than 2 years earlier. I watched as she sat behind a glass window in a small wood-paneled recording booth, working with an editor to assemble a radio piece about the start of the new school year. Other stories she'd worked on had taken her to the maternity ward of a local hospital and into the lives of dock workers at the nearby port. Dessous covered a violent, gang-ridden community. She matter-of-factly told me what happened the week before when she tried to get some information from the local police precinct. The police told her to leave, saying, "We don't answer questions from little journalists." Then they hit her on her back, threatened to smash her head and kill her, and tore off her press pass. I've interviewed a lot of bandits and thugs in this neighborhood, Dessous said, and they always joke around and give me a warm welcome. But here I was inside a police station where I was supposed to feel secure, and 6 officers assaulted me. Radio Boukman said this was the 3rd time police had attacked one of their reporters, and they filed an official complaint and a lawsuit to prevent it from happening again. Dessous said listeners seemed to appreciate the lengths to which she and her colleagues went to cover the news. The first question people ask when you try to interview them in the street is, "Which station are you from?" she told me. And when you say you're from Radio Boukman, they always say, "Oh, this is our radio. This is the voice of the people. So we're willing to talk and share our story with you." Etan Dupain, you're a Haitian journalist. What is the media landscape like there in Haiti, and what role does it play in furthering the goals of peaceful democratic change?
I feel like the media is doing their job. Sometimes it can be frustrated because there's a lack of professionalism. There's a lack of urgency on the way they report. I feel like the media can do better on helping people understand what's going on. I think the system that people are asking to change, I feel like the media was supposed to be part of it too. But also there's some alternative media, online media. A lot of people get their news right now online, on Twitter, Facebook. So that also changing stuff. But Haiti still heavily rely on radio. So I hope things get better. And then if there are changes, it also happen with the media landscape.
When you look back over the past decade and how things in Haiti evolved after the storm, what's your biggest takeaway?
I think Haiti is a very dangerous path. If Haiti don't go through some painful moment internally, painful discussion between Haitian citizens to find out what's the best path forward for the country, I feel like, things will keep on going the way they are right now, and it will keep being an unstable place where people will think maybe all these people, they don't know what they're doing, or they don't know what to do with this country. My biggest takeaway will be Haiti needs this moment to be able to move forward from the constant instability. I feel like we are in a painful moment, but we can also go to even worse moment if there is no changes in the near future.
I imagine it would be so easy for many people to just look at the situation in Haiti and kind of just throw up their hands. Like, what gives you reason for hope?
This is the first time you see people from the middle class, young people get together asking for accountability. You know, everywhere in the country right now, people know this phrase called Petro-Caribbean, which means where's the Petro-Caribbean fund? I feel like something will come out of this, because until you can restore faith in in the political process, maybe you'll have less people voted in the last election. Last election, it was 18%. The president we have right now was elected with around 500,000 votes. This is for a country of 11 million people. So this is crazy. When you look at the street in Port-au-Prince, the size of the protests, you can find this amount of people in a very good protest Sunday.
Etan Dupain, thank you so much for all your time. I really appreciate it. And good luck with your reporting in Haiti, and stay safe.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Etan Dupain is a freelance journalist based in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. You could keep up with the latest developments on the rapidly evolving situation there by following him on Twitter. Just search for his name, Etan, E-T-A-N-T, Dupain, D-U-P-A-I-N. Visit my website at farfromhomepodcast.org to see some photos and videos from my visit to Haiti back in 2010. And if you'd like to make a donation to help the Haitian people, I've posted links to several organizations where I think your money will be spent wisely and actually go to the people who need it. Don't worry, the Red Cross is not on that list. Special thanks today to Sasha Kramer and Daniel Tilius, to Anthony Kozar, who composed some of the music you heard in this episode, to Katie McGee for editorial assistance, and to my original editors, Alyssa Barba, Elena Pearl, and Jenny Schmidt. Thanks also to the Public Radio Exchange for podcast hosting and technical support. If you know anyone who might like this show, please let them know they could subscribe through Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Stitcher, Spotify, now even Pandora, pretty much all the places. And remember, you could also follow Far From Home on Instagram or Facebook, or tweet me at Scott Gurian. My Season 2 logo comes from Polemic, which designs award-winning experiences all over the world at the intersection of culture, commerce, and community. Find out how they could help your business at polemicdesign.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.